Ever since Jeff Bezos announced plans for Amazon Prime Air back in 2013, there's been a lot of hype surrounding the idea of using drones for deliveries. However, with question marks surrounding both safety and sustainability, it is unclear whether this is a viable possibility for the supply chains of the future. Today on Lokad TV, we're delighted to be joined by Emmanuel de Maistre, who's going to help us answer this question. So Emmanuel, thanks very much for joining us today. As always, we like to know a little bit about our guests, so perhaps you could just tell us a little bit more about your background and also a little bit about Delair, the company you're currently at.
Sure, and thanks for having me. So my name is Emmanuel and I've been in the drone business for 7 years, which is quite long for the industry actually. And I started a drone company back in 2012 called Redbird, and that was a French company which we ran for about 5 years until we got acquired by a US company called Airware. So for 5 years I witnessed the birth of the commercial drone industry from the very beginning, the early regulation, all the way up to actually quite mature industry today, since a lot of businesses are using drones for a lot of applications.
Okay, great. And our topic today is all about sort of the prospect of using drones in supply chains. I mean, over the New Year's celebrations that recently happened, we saw those really cool videos of drones doing sort of fireworks displays. But from a more sort of practical usage, I mean, what's kind of your view on the industry at present?
I mean, my view is that I believe as far as supply chain is concerned, drones are not there yet. But also I think that I would say the Amazon precedent, was also gearing the expectations probably the wrong way. I mean, people were looking at drones for deliveries, and when I look at what drones are getting very good at, I mean, that's my humble, I would say, interested amateur perspective, is that deliveries is probably not one of those things where they're going to really shine. I mean, maybe they will, but when I just look at drones, I see them getting smaller, cheaper, smarter, and all of that converge to plenty of very useful things, but that are not very related to deliveries. And where I see plenty of interest is to improve what is happening as far as within the warehouses, within large facilities, but also maybe to help for autonomous vehicles as support, and so plenty of other angles, but that are probably not around the deliveries. I don't know. I mean, maybe Emmanuel, what is your take on that?
I think it's been a recurring topic of discussion in the drone industry for a long time. And I remember so well the Amazon announcement back in 2013, if I'm right. There was a huge media coverage since after Jeff Bezos said he would deliver packages via drones. And I also remember he said it would take 5 years until it becomes a commercial reality. The thing is, it didn't become a commercial reality. For the everyday package delivery. Even though I've seen some really interesting niche use cases being developed for delivering packages in really remote areas, or some very highly specific industrial cases like mining, like delivering mining parts or packages into these huge sites like these big mines where basically nobody is running on the ground. And I think there's a bright future for drone delivery. It's a use case that has not been really investigated yet. And it's certainly a big opportunity for new businesses. What I would say though is that this hype around drone delivery has been also seen. I would say we've seen a similar hype between drone delivery and the drone industry in general. There has been about $3 billion invested for about a decade in the drone business. And if you look at the reality today, very few companies today make significant revenue, with the only exception being DJI, the Chinese giant, making about $3 billion in revenue. Otherwise, the rest of the industry is small companies still on the startup stage that are still struggling to be profitable.
Mm-hmm. And where DJI, I guess, has been very sort of successful is with those sort of hobbyists and people interested in sort of filming themselves. Emmanuel sort of mentioned there also the sort of mining industry. I mean, what are the use cases that drones are actually currently used for?
I mean, in general, I believe right now it's mostly for fun. I mean, for fun, and also probably for the entertainment industry, where I can see, but again, that's my amateurish perspective, is that you can already see that there is so many series coming out where drones are actually used. You can see that it's the way it's shot, it is a drone shot, and it's much cheaper and easier than helicopter, and the quality now is 4K. But as far as supply chain is concerned, I think what people maybe underestimating is that how messy the world is. Your warehouse might not be something that is like super lean and well organized. Your facilities might be over a landscape that is accidented. You have plenty of areas where the world is more messy than people would expect. When I say messy, it's complicated to get from point A to point B. It's just sometimes it's even complicated to look around because it's not easy to circulate. Maybe sometimes it's not even convenient to circulate by foot. You can only drive, but it's not. There is nothing really in place to just walk around, or it's dangerous. And this is a sort of situation where I see, drones being very useful is to let supply chains become better at dealing with this kind of messy landscape.
Okay, Emmanuel, what are your thoughts here? Are there any sort of use cases which you'd say are underexploited, which could be of interest maybe for the future?
Sure. A few remarks first on what John has just said. First, the consumer use case, the consumer drones were the majority of the drones sold for years, but there was a shift until recently. I would say like 2 years ago, we started to see way more business into the commercial side. And now I think, in the near future, the consumer drone will be a minority part of the industry. And most of the revenue will be done on the commercial side of things, whether it's hardware or software or services. In terms of use cases, if you look at the commercial side of things, you'll start with basic imagery, but then when you go into data processing, you open a whole lot of opportunities like 3D reconstruction, bridge inspection, pipeline inspection, or railway maintenance, vegetation encroachment for power lines, and so on. Even agriculture, of course. Drones are being widely used today for agriculture. And the other use case that has been initially started with defense-grade drones is security, of course, like using drones to patrol, whether it's a border or an industrial site, whatever. We will see more and more drones being used for security purposes. So again, consumer is one use case, and then you have all the industrial use cases and the security and defense use cases. What will unlock the commercial use cases, including in supply chain, it's going to be autonomy. And Jonas, you just mentioned autonomous vehicles, which are coming on the ground. Drones are by nature an autonomous vehicle. And the other brick that's required to fully unlock autonomy will be infrastructure to allow the takeoff and landing of drones in a fully autonomous way. So yeah, drone delivery has not been completely accomplished yet, but it's not for technical reasons. I think drones are pretty safe today. There has been maybe billions of flights today that we can take the data from. I think that the challenge is on the regulation side and the certification side.
Okay, we'll sort of come back to that idea of safety in a little second. With regards to deliveries, if it was to become a viable prospect for our supply chains, how would that affect us in the future? How would we have to change our processes to kind of take that into account?
I mean, it will become one more modality. I mean, you see that I believe that in general supply chains are becoming more complex because you have more options, and drones are yet another options. A decade ago, when you wanted to have something coming from China, you had two options, either by sea or by air, with regular air traffic. And now, something like 5 or 6 years ago, there was a train. It was possible to ship through trains, and now drones are just like that. You get one more option. So you will have truck deliveries with actually a human driver, or it will be autonomous. You can have the drone options. So, and The way I see that is that it will require the companies to be able to embrace, I would say, a world where there is much more options available, which I believe also requires things that are much more automated. Because if you have right now, I mean, just to have a glance of what is the state of supply chains, is that right now when people need to make decisions, it's mostly spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets, and it's fine if you have a landscape that is relatively straightforward, not too many options. Your option is how many units do I order, produce, or ship, and you can keep that into one spreadsheet. But as soon as you start to decide every single unit, am I going to ship this unit by a drone or something? And I think at the drone level, you can really think, unit by unit. So it's not about I take 30 or 40 tons of stuff that I move from one place A to place B. It's about, you can really think about delivering things like unit by unit in a way that is cheap and efficient, or at least in ways that were just completely impossible if you were thinking about delivering goods through a truck. But suddenly you've kind of exploded your inventory into literally millions of units where you will need to take like individual decisions, and this requires something that is dramatically better than Excel spreadsheets, I believe.
Okay. Let's go back to that idea of safety then. If currently there's not many drones in the air, so when we're talking from a safety perspective, you've got an individual pilot that might be watching it, there's the autonomy, but basically there's just sort of one thing in the air and it's got to avoid a few helicopters and planes. But if we're looking ahead to the future, and suddenly you've got this idea of there being lots more drones and a higher volume of sort of objects flying in the air, can it really be safe?
Oh yeah, for sure. We've found solutions for issues that are way more dangerous, I would say, or unsafe potentially than drones. If you look at the safety issues, the potential safety issues, you'd have to make sure drones will be safe for the people and goods on the ground and for the other aircrafts in the air. So if you first look at the air traffic, of course, drone will have to avoid, or I mean, the aircrafts will have to avoid drones and avoid any potential collision. That requires what people call the UTM, which stands for Unmanned Traffic Management. So drone will have to be equipped somehow with communication to basically communicate their position in real time with some kind of air traffic control that would be automated as well. We cannot have like an air traffic controller like manually checking the flight of a drone, and these are some technical challenges that are not been solved yet, but the size and the weight of the sensor makes me believe it's really an easy, I would say, issue to solve. What won't be easy is to harmonize that framework and these technologies among different countries, whether it's Europe or the US or, I mean, of course, Asia and so on. It's not going to be easy to make sure all these civil aviation authorities, they agree on the same principles. And today, of course, there is the European Aviation Authority that is trying to harmonize everything that's going on in Europe, but it's not quite synchronized with the US and Asia as usual in aeronautics. On the ground, the drone will have to be somehow equipped with a way to land safely or crash land safely, which would mean maybe parachutes or like landing areas that are known to be safe in case the drone would not have to land in a controlled way. And it has, I mean, parachutes are mainstream today for drones, but like corridors, they're like safe corridors, of course, have not been developed or not been put in place so far, and that's another challenge to tackle.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it could just really revolutionize the way that even our cities kind of look. From a kind of economic perspective, is the benefit there? I mean, how does using a drone compare to using a delivery vehicle and one driver? Is it really that much better off if you use a drone?
I mean, basic physics would tell you that moving something like 2 tons of metal, around to deliver a 200-gram package is not super top-notch efficient. That's that I would say basic physics. Then obviously, per kilogram, a truck is much more efficient than a drone because it doesn't have to fly in the air. But when you think, I mean, if you're not in a dense urban environment, most of the mass of the vehicle is just moved around for nothing. I mean, supply, especially I would say the last kilometer of supply chain, you're very, very wasteful. I mean, you have a large vehicle that is moving around. The solution might be to have something that would be just driving on the ground, just like you could think of autonomous vehicle, just way smaller. Because again, the minimal size for a delivery vehicle, a non-autonomous one, is that you need to have like a human on board. And by the way, there is a minimal size for your car, which is probably something like half a ton, because if you're smaller than that, it becomes actually quite dangerous for the person inside the car. You need, somehow the car is not just, most of the mass is actually around you to actually protect you in case of a crash, so that you can actually survive a crash. So you can't really have like a tiny car, or you end up with something that is more like a motorcycle, which by the way is a lot more dangerous than a car, statistically speaking.
It's not just about the weight of the package,
Yes,
by the way. You have the value of the package,
yes,
and you have the value of delivering it fast.
Yes.
And there is one company actually in California called Zipline that operates mostly in Africa so far, but of course that will expand someday. And they deliver blood samples in Rwanda, and I think they've started operations in Kenya, if I'm right. And they've really been very successful. They are heavily funded. They've a nice, like 1.4 billion valuation so far, and they've proven the use case. Because like think about driving on the Rwanda roads, especially during the rain season. You take hours to just maybe do 20 kilometers. So sending a blood sample or sending medicines or anything high value that needs to be delivered fast, then you have a great use case for drone deliveries.
Yeah, it's an amazing use case, one I'd never really sort of thought of. We'll start wrapping things up. How about from an environmental perspective? When you're taking into account the cost of the batteries, the lifetime of the actual drone, is there really an environmental benefit? Is there really an environmental argument for using drones?
So I'd say probably yes. I'm not sure we have all the data so far or the publicly available data to make such assessments, environmental assessments. But I'd say, drone, if it's properly used, has a quite long lifespan. We've in our company we've been using the same drone over and over again for 3 years. Of course, you have to replace the battery, but I'd say you can. And that these drones were like 4 or 5 kilograms drones, so not like the tiny consumer drones. So I think, and they've been flying hundreds of times. So if you look at and of course, the carbon emission was zero, basically. I mean, taking into account it was electricity only, was very little carbon emission. I'd say the environmental benefit can be really high. There is a question of the social acceptance of drones, maybe, and that should be taken into account into the environmental benefit. I'm not sure people would want to hear this big buzz, every day or frequently over the heads, because drones are quite noisy, and that's something people do not think about when they speak about drone deliveries. It can be quite annoying, and that's like a noise pollution somehow to take into account.
Okay, and Johannes, so we'll leave the final word to you. Can you really envisage a day where we're incredibly used to having drones flying over our head, and it's a normal future for us?
Yeah, so I suspect that probably the future that I'm thinking of is that probably the vast majority of drones might be actually very small, so you don't notice them because I mean you look at the trends. I mean right now DJI models are about this size, but if you think 20 years down the future they will be maybe this size, having the same capabilities. So at this point it will be, 50 meters away. You won't see them, you won't hear them. So they will do most of this recon job, imaging, smart imaging and whatnot, but that will be mostly invisible, on purpose, by the way, which is a pretty desirable quality. For the delivery ones, where physics says, well, unless we made like some gigantic breakthrough in batteries, if you want to carry 200 grams, you will probably need to have a drone that is probably twice the mass of the package or something. I don't know, but I would guess something in this area. So it can't be impossibly small. It will be smaller, but probably not vanishingly small. For those ones, I don't know. I mean, probably people will have like smart tricks, just like I would say straight takeoff, so that you reach 200 meters and you don't see them. And so yes, I think there will be plenty of things, but I see that more remote. I would say for deliveries, I still remain convinced that it will take more time to get that, except maybe for the very high value, high emergency niche where, yes, indeed for, I would say medical supplies, even, I mean, for now, for example, even in Paris, normally it's forbidden to fly over Paris, but there is one exception, is helicopters for a medical emergency. So again, I don't know. I mean, a medical emergency might also be something where people actually use drones rather than helicopters, and maybe even to carry people.
Of course.
Just because it would be faster to get a drone to take somebody who is injured back to an hospital instead of waiting for an helicopter that drive fast, but it's just that you have so few of them around.
Okay, would you agree with that? What can you see coming up next in the world of drones?
Well, drone will carry people one day, and it's actually not science fiction. You already have unmanned helicopters, very heavy helicopters, carrying actually army supplies, especially in Afghanistan. And these are like real, helicopters, gas-powered, of course. But we will see first hybrid vehicles taking probably like carrying people. And I'm thinking about the, airport to cities liaison. That might be a great use case to start such transportation. When you have to go very quickly from the airport to the city, you might envision some kind of hybrid helicopter, unmanned, that would carry the people from the airport to the very heart of London or New York or any other city in the world, of course. And then on a longer term, I think it's really not crazy to think that this maybe 4-6 passenger aircraft will carry people in a very autonomous way, whether they're hybrid or fully electric. That will depend on the progress on the batteries. But a lot of companies are working on it, and of course they do some marketing, but some are pretty serious. And I see Airbus, Boeing, Uber, and many others that are betting on such use case. That might not happen in the next few years, but if you look if you look what happened in the past, let's say 5 to 10 years, and what we've done in technology globally, it's not crazy to think this type of a use case will arrive in the next 5 to 10 years as well.
Okay.
And I wish that for sure.
It's exciting times, so watch this space. So I'll have to leave it there, but thanks both for your time. So that's everything for this week. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching.